It was a gloomy and windy night when Melissa decided to stop at an isolated gas station during her overnight drive. The gas station's dim lights were the only source of illumination on miles of deserted road. Melissa felt exhausted after hours of driving alone, but the light from the gas station was a glimmer of safety in the darkness. She parked her car and got out, deciding to stretch her legs and drink some coffee to stay awake. Upon entering the gas station convenience store, Melissa immediately noticed something strange. There was only one attendant at the counter, a grim-looking man with eyes that looked tired and worried. The store was empty, and Melissa didn't see any other customers. She walked up to the counter and greeted the attendant with a smile, trying to ignore the feeling of discomfort that invaded her. The man looked at her with a blank expression and began to prepare coffee. "Are you traveling alone?" he asked, his voice monotone. "Yes," Melissa replied, trying to keep the conversation light. "It's a long journey to my destination." As the attendant served coffee, Melissa looked around the store and noticed something even stranger. The shelves were practically empty, with only a few moldy products and dusty canned goods. It was as if the gas station was abandoned, except for the presence of the attendant. "Are you guys experiencing any supply problems or something?" Melissa asked, pointing to the empty shelves. The attendant shrugged, looking indifferent. "We haven't had much movement around here lately." Melissa took the coffee and paid, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. She decided not to prolong her stop and returned to her car, eager to leave the gas station behind. As she headed back down the dark road, the feeling that something was wrong only grew. She looked in the rearview mirror and noticed that a car was following her in the distance. At first, she didn't think much about it, as it was common to encounter other drivers on a deserted road. However, as she drove forward, the car continued behind her, making no attempt to overtake her. Melissa began to feel a chill down her spine and decided to make an impromptu change of direction to lose the unknown car. She turned right onto a country road, waiting for the car to follow. To her surprise, the car continued straight ahead on the main road. Breathing a sigh of relief, Melissa continued down the country road, but soon realized that she was completely alone in a deserted region. The feeling of isolation disturbed her, and she looked at the clock, noticing that it was late at night and that there weren't many gas stations or places to stop nearby. Eventually, Melissa saw another gas station up ahead. She hesitated, remembering the strange experience at the previous post. However, her car was almost out of fuel, and she had no other option than to stop for gas. The new gas station was equally dingy and deserted. Melissa parked the car and reluctantly entered the convenience store. To her surprise, she found the same desolate scene, empty shelves, and a somber-looking attendant. She asked to fill up the tank and took the opportunity to buy a quick snack, although the lack of options was evident. The attendant barely looked at her as he did his job. Just as Melissa was about to leave, a customer hurried into the store. He was agitated and looked terrified. He whispered something to the attendant, who immediately turned pale. "What is happening?" Melissa asked, worried about the exchange of tense looks between the two men. The customer looked at her, his eyes filled with fear. "You shouldn't be here. You need to leave now, before they come." Melissa felt her heart speed up. "Who are they?" Before anyone could respond, a series of loud, frantic knocks echoed on the store's door. Melissa, the clerk, and the customer turned to face the door, all sharing the same expression of horror. Something was outside, knocking loudly on the door, as if it wanted to enter. The attendant quickly turned off the store's lights, plunging them into darkness. Melissa could hear the sound of the banging getting louder and more violent. The customer pulled her to a corner of the store, whispering for them to remain silent. The knocking continued, accompanied by guttural sounds and scratching on the door. Melissa was terrified, unable to understand what was happening. She silently prayed that the thing outside would give up and go away. Finally, after an eternity of terror, the sounds stopped. The silence was almost scarier than the earlier commotion. The customer waited a few more minutes before daring to turn on a dim flashlight. When the light illuminated the area, they saw that the door was scratched and damaged, but the thing that had attacked it was gone. Melissa and the others exited the store cautiously, looking around to make sure they were safe. The client explained that he did not know what these creatures were, but he called them the Hungry Ones. as if they were something supernatural and evil that inhabited the darkness of the night. Melissa thanked the customer for the warning and ran back to her car, without looking back. She drove as fast as she could, leaving the haunted gas station behind. That terrifying night at the gas station would remain etched in her memory forever, a grim reminder that the unknown and the supernatural can lurk in the shadows of the darkest night. Melissa drove at high speed down the dark road, her heart still pounding with fear of what had happened at the gas station. She wondered whether she should call the police or seek help, but the lack of cell phone signal in this isolated region left her completely defenseless. Time passed slowly, and the only light that cut through the darkness was the dim glow of the car's headlights. The winding road ahead made her tense as she didn't know what she might encounter on that macabre night. Suddenly, something appeared on the road in front of her. Melissa braked sharply, gripping the steering wheel tightly. It was a vehicle stopped in the middle of the road, completely turned off. The taillights flashed intermittently, and Melissa could see the silhouette of someone standing next to the car. She was unsure what to do. It could be someone needing help, but it could also be a trap. Remembering the customer's warning at the gas station, she decided to stay in her car and keep a safe distance. Melissa watched as the figure slowly approached. The person was dressed in torn and disheveled clothes, and his expression looked blank and frightening. She felt a shiver run down her spine when she realized that the person's eyes were completely blank, with no visible pupils. The stranger stopped a few meters from Melissa's car and began to slowly approach, his steps unsteady and uncoordinated. He reached out with a trembling hand toward the car, as if he wanted to reach her. Melissa felt her panic rising as she tried to remain calm. She knew she couldn't open the window or allow the stranger into her car. With her heart racing, she accelerated the car and drove around the stopped vehicle, leaving the stranger behind on the dark road. As she drove away, Melissa couldn't take her eyes off the rearview mirror. The stranger was still there, standing in the middle of the road, watching her leave with his empty, lifeless eyes. The night trip became even more tense. Melissa was determined to get to safety as quickly as possible, but the darkness seemed to stretch endlessly before her. Every shadow and every sound in the darkness made her shudder. After some time, she finally spotted the lights of a police checkpoint ahead. She sped towards the scene, relieved to see the presence of authorities. Upon arriving at the checkpoint, Melissa got out of the car, visibly shaken. She explained the situation to the police officer on duty, including what had happened at the gas station and the frightening encounter on the road. The police officer looked serious as he listened to her story. He got on the radio and called for backup, asking for other officers to be sent to investigate the gas station and the road where Melissa had seen the stranger. While waiting for backup, Melissa couldn't shake the feeling that something very dark was happening that night. She wondered if she was dealing with something supernatural, as the gas station customer had suggested. The arrival of reinforcements finally gave Melissa some relief. The police officers reassured her and promised to thoroughly investigate what was happening. Meanwhile, Melissa waited in a safe place, still traumatized by the terrible night she had experienced. What else lay ahead on that sinister journey, and how could she escape the nightmare that seemed to haunt her? These were the questions that plagued her mind as she waited for answers. Hours had passed since Melissa told her story to authorities at the police checkpoint. She was sitting in a small room, surrounded by police officers investigating the incident. The walls were covered with maps and notes, and the atmosphere was tense. One of the officers, Sergeant Hernandez, entered the room and sat down across from Melissa. He had a serious expression on his face as he began asking detailed questions about the previous night's events. Melissa told her everything she knew, from her stop at the first gas station to her encounter with the stranger on the road. She mentioned the gas station client and her mention, "to the hungry." Hernandez's eyes narrowed when he heard that detail. "You did well not to allow the stranger into your car," Hernandez said seriously. "It looks like you had an encounter with something very dangerous." Melissa was confused and scared. What's going on? Who were those strangers? And why was the gas station so deserted? Hernandez sighed before responding. The gas station had been abandoned for years. There were reports of supernatural activity in that area, and the police were not allowed to investigate. Last night's events forced us to finally intervene. As for the hungry, they are supernatural creatures that feed on fear and terror. They are attracted to abandoned places and dark roads. That's why you found them both at the gas station and on the road. Melissa was stunned. She had never imagined that something like this could exist. And what will happen now? Hernandez looked at her with compassion. We will continue to investigate and take steps to deal with these creatures. You did the right thing by seeking help. We are now aware of their existence and will work to keep them away from roads and people. As the conversation continued, Melissa felt a sense of relief mixed with lingering fear. She knew that this was just the beginning of a long struggle against the unknown. A few weeks later, Melissa read a news story about a police raid in the area of the abandoned gas station. It appeared that the hungry had been driven away, but details were scarce. She hoped she would never have to face something so scary again. The experience left her with emotional scars, but it also made her realize the importance of trusting her instincts and asking for help when needed. She would never again travel the road at night without remembering the shadows that lurked in the darkness. Melissa's story was a dark reminder that the world was full of terrifying mysteries, waiting to be discovered in the shadows of night. And as she drove away from that nightmare, she knew that the darkness held secrets that could never be fully understood.